Oh, hell yeah. Did they finally release new Tyranid models?
No, these are actually much cooler alternative sculpts that I 3D printed.
3D. 3D printed? You lost your damn mind, boy. This is how you end up with your face on the side of a milk carton. They got their ears everywhere. I bet they got this room bugged right now.
Yeah, the bugs are right here. I 3D printed them.
You hear that? I bet they got choppers triangulating our coordinates as we speak. I gotta go arm the booby traps.
Hello again, fellow hobby anarchists. I think it's safe to say that we're always looking for cool models to paint and play with. In my experience, a model that doesn't excite me is just a model that doesn't get painted. And with the rise in popularity of our hobby, we now suddenly have something that was historically quite scarce: options. We now have a variety of companies, both big and small, that produce really nice quality models. And then we also have 3D printing, where these awesome sculptors are producing 3D designs that we can print at home, that either give us a bunch of new options for customizing our models, or actually even improving on the current Games Workshop sculpts themselves. And let's be clear from the get-go. This is not a video about me shitting on Games Workshop. I firmly believe that they produce some of the most amazing models that money can buy. But still, options. Remember, it's still your time, it's still your money, and it's still your army. So if you want to customize your army with bits, whether from Games Workshop or from a different company, I think you should do it. Also, if you want to use an alternative model from a different company altogether because you don't like the Games Workshop models but you still want to play that army, I think you should do that as well. So for science, I decided to start up my brand new Anycubic Photon Mono X 6K printer, print out some alternative sculpts, and see how they compare. Not only the quality of the model and how cool it looks compared to the official Games Workshop model, but also see how it looks once it's all painted up in a Games Workshop color scheme. I really dig these vicious, deadly looking aliens, and they really look like they could fit well into a Tyranid army or even compose an entire army of them. So to give us an apples to apples comparison, I'm going to paint up this model in a classic Hive Tyrant color scheme, the one that my brain goes to when I think of Tyranids. And we're going to do it in a heavy metal paint style and see how they look compared to the real Games Workshop Tyranids. So you may be asking, why, John, are you priming this model blue? There's no blue in the Hive Tyrant color scheme. Good question. I recently got some of these Molotow marker refills, and I've seen Marco on the Not Just Make a YouTube channel use them to prime, and they look great. I was pumped to try them out, and I guess I just didn't really consider that there was no reason to actually prime this model blue. I got excited and didn't think this through. The heavy metal paint style is known for being very vibrant and clean. And just like any miniature painting style, there are many paths to the same destination. For me, I found the most time-efficient way to achieve this look is done in 3 simple steps. Oh, I bet you thought I was just going to give you the 3 steps right now, so you could just learn the 3 steps and then now watch the rest of the video. Ha! I'm onto you. Not going to happen. The best part about this 3-step process that I've yet to explain to you is that it grows with you as a painter. You can bring more depth to each of these steps or go back and forth to them to build up a higher quality final product, or you can keep it very minimal if you're trying to hammer out a bunch of models and still make them look great on the table. Man, I bet you really want to know what those 3 steps are. All right, I won't keep you waiting any longer. The first step is obviously to base coat each surface of the model. This is going to be our mid-tone, so remember that. It's not brighter than we want our final mid-tone to be. It's not darker. It's right in the middle. Most importantly, it needs to be a fully opaque coat. Make sure you give it multiple layers so you don't see any of your primer underneath. That step is pretty self-explanatory, so let's go on to step number 2. Here we're going to add depth of color through washes or very thin paint over all of that base coated surface. We want it to go right into our cracks and crevices and add some color depth there. It's important that your wash isn't so intense that it completely covers or blows out your base tone. As you can see, our skin starts to look a little bit like Freddy Krueger here, but I can still tell that there's a cream color underneath. I like to use either contrast medium or flow aid to ensure the wash still flows into the details, but doesn't tint our overall color so much that our next steps are going to look like trash. At this point in the painting process, I realized that my Hive Tyrant skin seems a little bit more reddish and irritated than the traditional Games Workshop style, and quite frankly, I'm okay with it. These models have a ton of interesting depth and detail on their body, and I want to make sure that we can accentuate that later. And it's better to get this reddish tone down in those cracks and crevices now, and we can build up and accentuate the cool sculpt as we go. And step 3 is where we are going to make or break the quality of our paint job. So we're going to spend some more time explaining this, as well as show it in multiple other steps around the model. But for starters, the most important thing we need to do is build back up to our pure base tone. The most important part of this is that we thin our paints properly. They do not want to leave a fully opaque or even mostly opaque layer on the model when we come back up and do this. I like to work with roughly a 50-50 mix of paint and water as I slowly build up these midtones again. The main reason people struggle with this paint style is in this step. If your paint's too thick, you don't get nice smooth transitions from your tinted surface back up to your midtone. You'd rather have paint that's too thin than too thick. Just be sure you don't have too much on your brush, or when you apply your coats, it's going to run off your brush and right into those nice shadows and crevices that you've created. I think there's a bit of an unspoken misconception about the heavy metal paint style out there. Because it's so clean and crisp, our eye interprets it as a very simplistic painting style. And that's not a slight on the paint style, not at all. But because the final product looks pretty straightforward, we feel that it means it must not take a lot of time to paint like this. All it takes is the correct level of skill. And maybe I'm just not skilled enough, but I'll tell you this painting process is not fast, especially this step. You want to build back up to that pure base tone while being careful to maintain the fade to the pure crimson shadows. Each successive layer should not cover the same amount of the surface as the thin layer below it. Work further and further away from the shadows with each coat, being careful to understand how much of your base tone you want shown on the surface. When it comes to highlighting, how many levels of highlighting you do is really up to how much patience you have. If you want a really high level golden demon piece, you're probably going to go through 6, 7, 8 or more levels of highlight. But for this Tyranid, I want him to look great at the table, and his skin is already so bright that I'm just going to use one highlight, a mix 50-50 of white and our olive skin base tone. I focus the color mostly around the areas that I want to catch the most attention. The face, the crisp edges I want to edge highlight, and the peaks of the upward facing surfaces like his wicked looking spine. Today's video is brought to us by Puppetswar, and that name may sound familiar to you because they've been around in the miniature wargaming hobby for many years. They're well known for their amazing bits and alternative sculpt options for your favorite war games. So when I found out they were taking their amazing sculpting ability and applying it to the 3D printing world, let's just say I was a little bit excited. And sure, there's a lot of companies out there that make models that you can 3D print at home. But how many of them can say that they've been in this hobby doing just this sculpting work for over a decade? When I'm looking for models to 3D print, I want high quality, characterful action poses that are unique and something that stands out. And that's exactly what Puppetswar does, and they don't just stop there. They also have multi-pose kits to print, so you can gear out your models exactly how you like. And they have spots for magnets so you can swap out weapons, arms, accessories on the fly. Check out the link below to the Puppetswar Patreon page, where signing up will get you a ton of amazing models with unique themes each month, as well as their My Mini Factory page. If you want individual bits or certain models, you can buy them one at a time there. And let's not forget about their OG website. The link is below as well. So a big thank you to Puppetswar for supporting the channel and making these awesome alternatives for us in wargaming. Let's get back to the video. I've decided to black in the eyes now, since I still have the skin tone paint wet on my palette. That way I can touch up the eyelids or the areas around there if I make a mistake while trying to paint in these eyes. According to the official Games Workshop color scheme, Lich Purple is the color used for a Tyranid Hive Tyrant carapace. Unfortunately, this color is no longer in production and mine is hard as a rock. So I decided to do some looking to try to find a color match. To my surprise, Games Workshop does not have a 1-to-1 color match, but Beaten Purple by P3 looks very, very close. Ironic that the majority of the Tyranid model line is so old that even the paint used to paint them is discontinued. Unfortunately, I found out that Beaten Purple has terrible coverage and took 8-10 coats to cover that blue primer underneath. There was no reason to prime this stupid thing blue. We repeat the same wash, then build back up our midtone to highlight step as before. However, it's important to note that this method can be a bit more tricky with flat surfaces or kind of larger organic shapes. I just try to reestablish that base tone in the areas that wouldn't fall in shadow, and slowly build up highlights on the edges by mixing in some faded plum to the Beaten Purple. Again, I'm reminding you here because I often need to remind myself because I forget. Keep the paint thin and keep the brush loaded with only a minimal amount of paint. It makes doing these edge highlights and smaller details so much easier. In my mind's eye, I always pictured that Hive Tyrants had black claws, but looking at the box art, it appears I was wrong. They go from a near black up to a nice crimson red. Very sinister, very cool. So we're going to use this as an excuse for us to practice a nice, smooth transition over a flat surface. This kind of heavy metal painting technique is often seen used painting sword blades, but seeing as these giant claws are basically alien bug swords, I think it still applies. The important thing is that we go pretty dark here with our shadow color. So I mix just a little bit of Floe into my black Templar contrast paint. That black is just too strong to be used straight out of the bottle. And we're all about being time efficient, and contrast paint takes quite a while to dry. So while that's drying, we're gonna head over to the teeth of our little bug boy here and knock those out real quick. I'm actually just going to keep that pure blue primer as the color on the inside of the mouth and the dark lining where the teeth meet the gums. See, I planned it all along. I'll do 2 quick coats of our base bone color and then a 50-50 mix of bone plus white as a thin line or point or dot on each tooth. You could wash the teeth and build them back up with an interesting color if you wanted more fancy pants looking teeth than I did. All right, our contrast paint is dry, so let's get back to the red claws. The key to having a nice smooth fade from red to black is to build it up slowly over many coats of very thin paint. I like to use Floe to thin my paint for this, just because it gives a nice, smooth, thin coat, and it extends the drying time so I don't accidentally rip up paint if I make 2 quick brush strokes over the same area. Oh, and if you were looking to pick up some Floe or like the mini holder I'm using, or brushes or paints, there's links below in the video description, and those are all affiliate links, meaning that it's no extra cost to you, and in some cases even a discount for purchasing with those links, and I get a little kickback, so you support the channel. If you work your way around the model, giving each claw a swipe of color, push towards the brighter areas. By the time you're done with the last claw, the first claw should be dry and ready for a second coat. Keep each coat covering less and less of our darker area. And if you're haphazard in applying this at this step, these glazes won't result in that nice smooth fade. You can go with thicker paint for the edge highlights of each blade, just so you don't have to do that part 20 times. But make sure it's not too thick or there's too much on your brush, or that's going to ooze over onto that nice fade you've created. And to build a bit of interest, I'm going to add a bit of bright red to my burnt red and pop our edge highlights just a bit. I want to focus these edge highlights towards the tip of each blade so it's brighter there and enhances the blend we've created. You know what we don't get enough of in YouTube mini painting videos? Montages. So that's why we're going to do a basing montage. Cue the basing montage. And with that, our alternative Tyranid model is complete. I gotta say, he looks like he could fit right into a Tyranid force with no worries. Also, he looks way cooler, and I'd love to have an entire army of Tyranids that would look like this dude right here. But what do you think? Do you only buy and use the models from the game you're playing? Or do you kit bash your own models from a variety of bits, use models by other companies, or 3D print alternatives to fit the theme, or maybe just because they're cooler than the originals? I'm truly curious what you think. And I'm sure it's already too late and the frothing wolves are already down in the comments section, but I want to be clear. I'm not advocating for the theft of IP for use for your own profit. Luckily, there's a ton of design space out there for amazing artists and 3D modelers to come up with their own unique takes on variety of models in the fantasy and science fiction realms. And I think this is a really good thing. The more options that artists and business owners have to create amazing models, amazing mini painting tools and paints and everything else in our hobby, the more we benefit from these options, because we get to financially support the people that we want to stand behind and want to see them succeed and make more amazing things. And yes, this does include financially supporting Games Workshop. And speaking of support, if you like what I do and want me to continue to make more videos, here are a few rapid fire ways how you can support me. Subscribe, like, comment, tell your nerdy friends about the channel. Join the Ninja on Patreon and get access to awesome rewards like a Discord server, a weekly vlog, and other fun stuff. Check out my merch and buy yourself or another nerd person that you love an awesome thing. And that's going to do it for today, folks. Thanks again for spending some time with me this week. I look forward to our next encounter. And until then, make sure you get out there, slay the gray. And let's be clear from the get-go. The main reason people struggle with the heavy medi, this kind of heavy medi painting sword blades. All right, we got Trash Panda Terry. He is on scout duty. We got the alligators with chainsaws attached to their tails. We got punji sticks in the ditches. And we got the neighborhood watch. Miss Gunderson is cataracts, but I gave her the sniper rifle anyway.